I'm so excited to bring Feldenkrais Method to Team Luke for the very first time. So it's a weird name, Feldenkrais. It rhymes with ice. So say it after me. Feldenkrais rhymes with ice. Feldenkrais rhymes with ice. Okay, we've got that out of the way. Great. My name is Erin Finkelstein, and my very first client I ever had called me on the phone and said, "Are you Erin Feldenkrais that does the Finkelstein method?" And I thought, well, sure, I guess so. My talk today is called Compassionate Touch for Creating Possibilities, and I changed awareness through movement to the master title, Feldenkrais for Happy Kids and Families. So throughout the slides today, we're going to experience Feldenkrais, not just talk about it, but in the beginning here, I'm going to give you an overview of the method. Creating compassionate touch requires awareness, and awareness is a skill we're going to learn how to develop today. So the Feldenkrais method is based off these ideas of neuroplasticity, and in fact, he was one of the earliest neuroplasticians. He believed the brain could change before the scientific community thought that neuroplasticity was a real thing that was happening in the brain. So he was one of the most brilliant minds of the 20th century, both physically and mentally. This method is much more than we can cover in an hour, but I hope to give you some good hands-on experience of how to create these qualities of touch and movement in your kiddos. One of the fundamental tenets of the method is that change is possible through learning. And he thought that learning was about this organic type of learning that we all learned how to do when we were children ourselves and learned how to walk. Nobody told us how to walk. We learned how to do it. And so a little bit about Moshe. He walked out of Russia and Ukraine in the last century when they were having problems then, and immigrated to Palestine by foot, which is now Israel, that part of Israel. And so he was really interested in self-defense and taught a lot of other Jewish people how to defend themselves along their journey. And he became the first judo master in the West. He studied with Kano in 1933 and founded a judo club in Paris that still runs today. He went on to earn degrees in mechanical and electrical engineering and a doctor of science in physics. And he applied all of this, physics, physiology, psychology, and human development, to the problem of re-educating a human to function at their highest potential. And one of those ways he did that, as you can see here, is through gaining skeletal awareness and how to use our skeletal awareness to function better in gravity. He worked with anyone from high-level athletes like this basketball legend Julius Erving to children with cerebral palsy. He had an excellent reputation of working with these kiddos and getting a great response to increase their level of functioning and comfort, as well as adults. He trained in America, or did 2 training programs, one in San Francisco and one in Amherst in the late 70s. And I love this picture. This last picture is of Ben-Gurion, who was the first prime minister of Israel. And he was always sort of a self-conscious person. And he, in his later years, went to Moshe and said, "Can you teach me how to stand on my head?" And he did. And the first people of Israel were really mad about that because it was their first prime minister. But it was memorialized in a statue that up until last week, I believe, was on the beach. And you can see it there, but it was a victim of arson. So hopefully they fix that soon and put up another statue. It's kind of a fun little tidbit. So I just want to tell you a little bit about my journey. I'm a classically trained musician, so you might be thinking, what are you doing here? I fell in love with this work when I found an awareness through movement class in my master's program. And I play in symphony orchestras, and I have a chamber ensemble called Urban Nocturnes. But I had a very challenging childhood. And this method helped me a lot deal with the stresses of my childhood, but also I suffered from these headaches that were probably mild seizures, but totally undiagnosed. Nobody knew it was. I lived in a small town, and I never really found out what the problem was, but I just remember having these episodes that made me feel overly sensitive, I just couldn't really function very well for a couple days after, and it happened for years. And then I kind of wore out of it. Additionally, my mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's when my brother was about 4 years old, early onset, and later also multiple sclerosis. So I've been really interested in the brain and issues with the brain and the potential of the human brain ever since. I've been a full-fledged Feldenkrais practitioner for 16 years, and my practice has grown so much with kids that I'm playing clarinet a lot less, which is okay. My heart is with these kiddos. So the Feldenkrais method is taught in 2 forms. The first one is called awareness through movement, and those are verbally guided lessons. Moshe left us like 500 different lessons because the potential in the human body and the human skeleton is infinite, the ways that we can move. Functional integration is actually a hands-on modality where I create the conditions in the nervous system to learn how to move differently through a certain kind of quality of touch and a certain kind of attention to the child. And we work with what's called the soma. Somatic means the body or the perception of the body. So the whole method is from the inside of the person out, if that makes sense, yeah? So we have to start with the perception of the individual in order for them to actually learn anything. This takes great self-awareness. And what we're developing in here is not just the kind of, I call it woo-woo self-awareness, but a neurological self-awareness of the brain's ability to perceive itself in space. So one of the main tenets is that we emphasize how to do something efficiently and not in a hard way. So we really emphasize what is the easiest way to achieve a certain function, and you'll see that in a little bit. Let's see, let's go to the next one. Okay, so let's have a talk. Let's talk about habits. And we're going to do our first movement exploration. So what do you guys think of when you think of the word habit? Something what? Something you do all the time. Did somebody say bad? Yep, people always say that. So it's a bad habit, right? Something you do all the time, and it's negative. It turns out that every single movement that you make is a habit. Let that sink in. Every single movement you make is a habit. So the way that you scratch your head, brush your teeth, is particular to you. The way you take a step is a map in your brain of the way you do something that's particular to you. So we work in this method through gaining awareness of what a person's potential is through knowing what their habit is, what the way their brain has constructed their reality, whether they have a brain injury or not, and how to give the nervous system more options in that. So there's infinite ways that we can create that. So let's try this first. Everybody, just without thinking about it, I want you to just interlace your hands and then let them go. And you're like, what's the big deal? I do that. It does not feel novel. That's something I do all the time, right? That would be a habit. Habits are not only bad, they're necessary, so they're also good. Your brain doesn't make a distinction between good or bad habits. It just does what it does. So how many of you have, look down for a moment, how many of you have your right thumb on top? Raise your hand. How many of you have your left thumb on top? Okay, half of you are not bad. It's just your habit. So what I'd like you to do now is very slowly do the opposite way. Feels what? Weird. That's my favorite word. Okay, so every time that your child or yourself is going through trying to learn something new, this is what they're feeling. But if you force it, it not only feels weird, it feels wrong, it feels bad. So we have to create the conditions in their nervous system to make it feel not weird, but interesting, but a possibility. Okay, so let's keep doing it for a moment. Do it the non-habitual way and just go really slowly and see, can you tell which finger touches the other hand first? Can you tell if your palms touch first? Who touches who first? Can you breathe while you do it? Yeah. She's sweating. She's stress sweating. Imagine what your kiddos are going through, right? Okay, so now what I'd like you to do is go a little slower, even slower. Now, go so slow that you could just pause and take a breath. Make sure your breath is moving. And then let your fingers touch, and then, oh, do you notice who touches first now? Oh, yes, all of a sudden you can sense, my fourth finger touched, or whatever, the first. Now what I'd like you to do is the same thing, but close your eyes. Take one of your senses away. Close your eyes, and now how much do you feel? Has your sensorial pattern gotten richer? Now, can you softly open your eyes, but see, can you still keep that same sensation available to you? It's wild, isn't it? Stuff is so wild. Yeah. Okay. So for some people that I work with, they don't feel a difference between the left or the right thumb on top. They're more ambidextrous. So I'd like you to try, keep going. You're like, or they're lying, or they're lying. Okay, so now I'd like you to do the same thing, but put your thumb, move it over one more digit to the non-habitual way, so that you have your thumb just hanging out, and now your fingers. Do the same process, go really slow. Can you breathe at the same time? Can you feel the moment before your fingers touch? Is it starting to get less weird and more interesting? That is you engaging your learning brain. Go one more digit. One more digit. That could be your habit. You don't know, right? Okay, go all the way now so it's just your pinky and your thumb. Can you feel, is the quality in your hands starting to change? Is it softer? Now go back to the original non-habitual way. So the thumb on top that you didn't choose. Does it feel less weird and more possible? What happened? I love teaching this. Your faces are great. Okay, now go back to your way, the habitual way. Does it feel less boring? Less like, why are we doing this? Can you feel all of your fingers differently? That's weird. Shall we talk about what happened? Okay. So this is a principle. The Weber-Fechner principle is a principle based on the scientific findings of calculations of two psychophysicists. Okay? I'm not a math person. I think it's great. I'm an arts person. I just borrow from the really smart math people. So this principle states that in order to increase your sensitivity, you have to reduce the overall stimuli present. So why do we want to be more sensitive? We want to be able to make distinctions in movement, right? That's what we want all of our kids to be able to move better, right? I've got a fan club here. We want our kids to be able to move better, right? But they're not going to be able to move better until they can sense for themselves those distinctions that you just sensed. But then you have to apply that to crawling and walking and all of these things that are much, much more complicated. So Feldenkrais said it best, if I raise an iron bar, I shall not feel the difference if a fly either lands on it or leaves it. If, on the other hand, I'm holding a feather, I shall feel a difference if the fly were to settle on it. The same applies to all your senses, okay? So when we move slowly with less effort, it increases our capacity to sense ourselves more fully, which allows us to then make these finer distinctions in movement, yeah? This leads to greater self-awareness, and neuro-re-education like this is our wheelhouse. Learning does not have to be hard. You don't need a ton of equipment. I know you all have it. That's okay. I'm not judging. I'm just saying you can start to use these principles of perception and awareness in a way to help your kids every day. Okay? So my studio is very different. You'll see me not working with a lot of props or toys unless I have to, but it's always in this context to elicit this kind of response. There are plenty of chairs up front. Please come all the way up. You just missed a really fun intertwining of hands. Maybe we'll do it again. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's happening. So neuroplasticity and the self-image. So Feldenkrais said we move in accordance to our perceived self-image. So this three-dimensional representation of the human is called a homunculus. Has anybody seen this before? No, okay. So this shows what a man's body would look like if each part grew in proportion to the area of the cortex of the brain concerned with directing movements. This was done in 1948, excuse me. So notice how big the hands are. Notice how big the lips are. Huge, how big the eyes are, how big the mouth is. So our personalized maps in the brain create this funny drawing in our own nervous system. And the key thing that I want you to take away today is that movement, quality of movement wires the brain, not the other way around. Let that sink in for a second. Movement rewires the brain. Even if there's damage, there are ways that the brain gets around it with the right kind of conditions. So just last year, so this is the old homunculus over here, and that's the brain, the cortex. Just last year, the drawing was updated because technology is updated, and recent studies show that it's much more complicated than we originally thought, of course, in 1948. The new drawing reveals the new regions of the brain that control whole body actions and integration of those actions, and is in a new region than previously thought. So you'll see over here, I think this thing works. I don't know how to work this thing. Well, you'll see over here like action, these little action places. So that's where the brain is actually integrating movement. That has huge implications for all of us, because if an area of the brain is damaged, you have other areas that are responsible for helping integrate that movement. So these repeated motions, when you repeat something, it becomes a habit. It's not necessarily bad, because you want those habits, and that creates those new synapses in the brain. But you have to get there from this kind of slow, sensorial approach, yeah? Okay, let's talk about you guys for a second. Moms, dads, caretakers. So we're going to do another exploration in a moment, but first it's really important to acknowledge that your touch is critical part of this healing with your kid, because your nervous system is connected to your child. Every time you touch them, which you're doing all day long, you are influencing how they are perceiving themselves. You're the only one with your child all day long, mostly. So the more that you know about yourself and your habits, the more you're going to be able to positively influence them. So this starts with having what my teacher, Russell Delman, says, radical self-acceptance, okay? And radical compassion for yourselves, because you might learn, wow, I really can influence my kid differently if I touch him differently, and maybe I haven't done that up until this point, and that's okay, okay? So radical self-acceptance. So the autonomic nervous system has two parts, okay? Sympathetic is your fight, flight, or freeze. You've all experienced this. I'm sure some of you live in this state. The parasympathetic is more your rest, digest. Your vagus nerve is helpful for calming you down. So when you try these explorations with yourself and with your kiddo, just keep that in mind, that you are in a spectrum and a continuum between these two places at any given time, and that you want to try to calm your system down and be very intentional with your kiddos when you're exploring these new ways of touching and new ways of moving. So the last thing we're going to do before we do some actual touching and moving is talking about action. So we're trying to improve our own action and our kiddos' action and the network and the webs between. And every action is a combination of thinking, sensing, moving, and feeling. So oftentimes we get very focused on how a kiddo moves, but I'm really interested in how the whole person is developing. So oftentimes when I start to get somebody sensing differently, one of these other pieces changes. Their movements change, or their connectivity, their emotional state changes. Their cognition starts to change. So I don't always know what's going to happen in a Feldenkrais lesson, except that something cool always happens. So it's not as like I'm going to do this movement to get that outcome, because you are changing this whole pie. So if you change one element in the pie, something else is going to shift. Okay? So before we do some touch, I want you to consider a couple of things. Can you observe your thoughts right now? It's hard to do, right? Maybe you're thinking, she's a little quacky. Maybe you're thinking, I don't know, this is really weird. I haven't heard anything like this. Whatever it is, can you just observe your thoughts for a moment? Maybe you're thinking about lunch, that's okay. It's not an easy practice to do, but I encourage you to just try it once in a while. Senses, so what can you sense right now? Maybe your hands are starting to be a little bigger in your own homunculus mind for a moment, but can you sense anything about your breathing? Can you consider your emotional state? Sleepy after lunch, I think. So let's talk about how we're going to learn how to have more compassion with our kiddos. And that's going to be through this creating a certain quality of touch. Okay? So touch is the foundation for learning. Everyone in this room is a human. All humans learn through touch and they learn through movement. It's that simple and that complicated. So we want to awaken the senses. We want to give our kids and ourselves greater movement diversification that remaps the brain for new possibilities and habits. So these are my 7 steps for quality touch. And if you saw my booth out there, and back here I have some flyers and also a QR code to download a little ebook that I wrote on 7 steps for quality touch. You can either do the QR code or write your name down and I'll send it to you. But first is this practice of taking a good solid minute and scan yourself. So oftentimes we do this lying on the floor. And that is because we all learn from gravity. And that's how we all learn how to develop. So I try to get all of my kiddos comfortable lying on the floor because I want them to be able to have this experience that you just had throughout different parts of their body. Now, I still work with kids that can't lay on the floor yet. Even big kids who, the goal is to get them to walk. I start with whatever they can do on the floor. And so I was tempted to but everything out of the way and have everybody lie on the floor because it's a little more powerful when you do that. But you're just going to have to trust me and try it at home. But what I want you to do right now is just close your eyes again, because that takes the sensorial piece out of it. And I want you to just sense yourself again. And this time go really global. And I want you to sense, how are your feet sitting on the floor? How comfortable are you sitting? Where do you notice your air moving in and out of yourself? What actually physically moves? How comfortable are you? Could you sit that way exactly as you are for the next half hour? What would you change? And then keeping your eyes closed, the second step is just bring your attention more towards your hands now. What do you feel there? Do your hands feel tense? Maybe buzzy from electronics? How hot or cold are they? Be brutally honest without judging yourself. Not knowing what you feel is this entry point for awareness. So now what I'd like you to do is take your hand, either hand. I'd like you to just bring it up to across your body to your shoulder. And then I'd like you to take it away. And do that a couple of times. How do you get there? How do you move your arm to get there? What do you do once you get there? Do you really feel your shoulder, or do you just slap your hand down? Take a moment there and just start to listen with your hand. Could you slow the movement down enough that you can start to feel? Maybe the top of your shoulder. Maybe you can start to explore. Where is your skeleton? Where is your bony structure? Maybe you can feel your clavicle. How interested can you get in discovering your own skeleton? The shoulder blade is on the back and it's got this cool little ridge. Could you find the little ridge? It's made for fingers, for lifting. Yeah. And then put your hand down for a moment and then try it with the other hand. Actually, don't try it with your hand yet. Rest for a second. Close your eyes and just feel the difference between where you touched and then the opposite side where you didn't touch. Do you feel a difference? Do you not feel a difference? And then try it with the other hand, right? So take your other hand across and just let yourself linger, get to know what fingers you feel. Do you feel more with your palm? Can you breathe as you do that? Just anywhere comfortable. Just start to explore your clavicle. Maybe your sternum in front. Did you know your first rib is right underneath your clavicle? Can you find that? Can you go slow enough that you can breathe and be curious? What is the quality like? Does your hand feel soft or hard? Connective or absent? Thick, or maybe does it feel wispy? Only listening. Sensing each potential place in yourself to connect to. Yeah? Bring your arm down for a second and just rest with your eyes closed and feel, does your chest feel any different? I don't know. I can't feel it. Only you can. Yeah? So if you have a kiddo here, you can try the same thing on them. If you don't, then what I'd like you to do is continue with this exploration of finding your skeleton. So just feel for a second. So you can open your eyes if you want. Let's talk about sitting for a second, right? Since we're all sitting in chairs. I'm not laying on the ground. So how comfortable are you in sitting right now? Right? What is your habit of sitting? Yeah? Do you feel like you need to sit up straighter? Yes, some people have that. Do you have that running in your head? I need to sit up straighter. Well, let's try it. Everybody try to sit up straighter and feel. Now, isn't there a reason why we didn't choose that? It doesn't feel great, right? Let's all be honest, right? It doesn't feel good to sit up straight because we don't know how. So go ahead and slouch again. and feel what did you do? Go back and forth. Try to sit up straight and close your eyes and feel how do you try to make yourself sit up straight, and then slouch again. Okay? So step number 4 in my little thing here is moving with their pattern first. So when you're trying things with your kids, instead of correcting them, I want you to try to move with their pattern first, just like I did with you. Right? So your pattern first was to try to move a certain way to sit up, right? Try it again if you want to get really clear about it. Okay? But there's a reason why you don't choose it, right? It's not very comfortable. So take your hands again, and if you have a kiddo, you can just touch your kiddo and keep that practice going. But for the rest of us, what I want you to do is find your pelvis. Okay? So your pelvis is a bowl that you're sitting on. Okay? So on the bottom of your pelvis, you have what? 2 sits bones on the left and the right. So yes, I'm going to have you sit on a hand. So lift your pelvis on one side, put your hand underneath, and find your sit bone. It's closer to your midline than you think, and it's very present when you find it, right? Can everybody find that? Okay, that is your structure in sitting. That's like your feet in sitting. These are soft chairs, so does it feel different on these chairs? I should have done it before the talk, but can you feel the difference between the 2 sides? Do it on the other side now. Feel your sits bones underneath the other side. Okay? Your sits bones are like a rocking horse. They are there to help you move your pelvis, front, back, left, and right. Okay? So as you're sitting on one of your hands, you can come out, you can go in, just start exploring. This isn't an exercise, it's just an exploration. Start to rock your pelvis forward and backward a little so you can feel that over your hand. Yeah, this is your skeleton. Everybody has one in there. So it's designed for movement. So if you want your kids to move better, you have to feel it in yourself. Yeah? So just start to rock your pelvis backwards and forwards a little bit. And just feel what you do. Feel when it moves. If you're not sure, close your eyes. Start to sense yourself in space. Does your shoulder move? Does your rib move? What happens? Maybe come to the edge of the seat a little bit more. These look like softy, comfy chairs. Hard to do this on. Yeah, so come to the edge of your seat a little bit. Okay, so now just notice for yourself as you rock your pelvis back and forth, can you put your hands now on the top of your pelvis, your pelvic bones on the side, and feel as you rock your pelvis, go really slowly to see what's the quality like. Is it fast? Is it bumpy? Is it smooth? Does it feel weird? That's our favorite word, right? Feel different? Now close your eyes and feel what happens in your head. Where does your head move in space? Does it move forward and back, or does it move not at all? Maybe your chest moves. If you look around, you can see lots and lots and lots of ways of doing this, right? Everybody does it differently because everybody's different. Everybody's neuro picture is different, right? Okay, so now let's try a couple ways. So continue rocking and rolling, but keep your spine stiff so that your head comes forward and backwards. I'll call that the penguin. Yeah. Some of you are like, oh yeah, that's what I do, right? So, because some of you are doing that. So when you do that, you're not bending in the middle at all. But feel under your hands. As you do this, use your hands to listen what happens, right? You can put a hand here, and you can feel maybe, oh, that just moves what? Forward and back. Okay? Crazy, right? Okay, now let's learn the opposite of the penguin. The opposite of the penguin is when you roll back on your sit bones, you let yourself slouch. Let your head come down, let your chest soften. Feels good, right? Be honest. Yeah, it feels good because that's the way the spine is designed to move. So let yourself fully slouch. How good can you slouch right now? Let your head come back all the way. And now go ahead and put a hand on your chest and just feel how that moves when you do that. Let your hand be a listening hand, that soft hand. Roll the pelvis back and then roll it back to where you were. Yeah? See, how soft can you make your chest? Our chest is a rib basket, not a rib cage. Cages are for not moving. Baskets are for moving, okay? That's designed to move. Okay, now do the opposite. Roll the pelvis forwards. Not going to be easy on these chairs. Roll the pelvis forward and look up. And some people, that's what they do, and then go back. And just go do that whole range of motion now. And feel, can you initiate the movement from those sits bones, your rocking horse, all the way in the bottom? How does that feel? What do you guys think? Different? Good? Bad? So go back and forth. Do the two ways. Do the penguin. Yeah. She's like, now which one did I do? I don't know. Right? Because you want to understand in yourself the way the skeleton's designed so that you can help your kiddos. Yeah? Does that make sense? The pelvis is everything. The pelvis initiates a lot of movement. So now let's use our hands to help ourselves. Find a place now where you're just in neutral, that your pelvis, just you rocked it back and forth, and now you feel those sit bones. Yeah? And how does it feel to sit there now? Does it feel easier? Do you feel like you're sitting up? Do you feel calm? This can be interactive. More aware. Feel more. What does more aware feel like? More comfortable. Yeah, others. So now if I said if you had to sit up straight, this is as straight as you need to be. So slouch again. Feel yourself, let yourself slouch. Then let yourself roll forward. Roll that pelvis forward to extend. Yeah. And now put one hand on your sternum and one hand on your lower belly. And as you slouch, I want you to feel your hands moving together. And then I want you to feel your hands coming apart. And can you let your pelvis initiate the movement still? So your hands are helping you listen. This guy's got the cutest smile. He's just smiling away. It's fun to see everybody else do it, huh? And then what I want you to do is take your hands and switch them. So the other hand is on top and the other. And by the way, why did you choose the first way? That was your habit. And does it feel different when you do it the opposite way? Yeah, it feels different, right? I think I got ahead of my slides. So, cardinal directions. You don't have to be, this is my last slide in here. I'm going to say it now, though. You do not have to be an anatomist or a therapist or a doctor to positively influence your child every day. The pelvis moves north, south, east, west, and all the directions in between. Same thing with the top of the arm bones and the hip joints. They are ball joints. So you can start to play in this way, and you're not going to hurt your child. If you have this quality of attention and quality of touch, you're only going to influence them positively. Because really, what we're doing with a kiddo that has a brain injury, or any other reason people come to me, an injury of any kind, or they just want to feel like they have a new body, or want to feel fresh again, or psychological stuff. The thing that we are doing is we are creating the conditions in our hands that they cannot do themselves. It's that simple and that complicated, right? When we have the connection in our hands, we're helping them sense what their brain can't come up with. And then we're helping them pattern it through this touch. You all just got smarter in here. You all didn't know that your pelvis did that, I don't think, right? But now you're going to walk out of here smarter, right? And that, when you know it inside of yourself, that's how you're going to teach it to your child, okay? So let's do a little bit more of the pelvic tilt. I have these chairs. They're bugging me. That's okay. Do you guys want to stand up and do something? Sure. Oh, yeah, you guys look like you want to stand up. Okay. Let's stand up and spread out a little bit. So do the same thing in your mind. Just close your eyes for a moment and feel your feet. I did this to a room full of doctors once. They all looked down at their feet. They're there. I promise they're there. But we don't always see them, right? So in our mind's eye, we don't see them. So what I'd like you to do is just shift your weight from one foot to the other. And again, feel how you do that. How does your weight go over one foot versus the other? Can you keep track of where your pelvis is in space? Can you think of yourself as a skeleton? Maybe, maybe not. It's the skeletal month coming up. I love October. Okay. And then come back for a moment to feeling both heels on the floor. And what I'd like you to do, put your hands on your hips, and I'd like you to, can you imagine where those sits bones are again? So now they're pointing towards your feet. And I'd like you to just tilt the pelvis a little bit, up and then down. And then can you follow it through your whole head and invite the whole of yourself to do that? So I can kind of think of that as north and south. Yeah? And then can you think now, so you've moved your pelvis over each heel and then tilted it north and south. Now can you just slowly make a circle in space with your pelvis? And can you feel it echo in your feet? I hope so. And can you feel it echo in your head? What happens in the center? Yeah? Infinite possibilities. Everybody's doing it differently. Yeah? Now sit for a moment, but do the same thing. Sit right on the edge of your seat and tilt the pelvis now north and south. Okay, you've gotten really good at that, right? But then can you start to explore what it's like to make a clock? Let the pressure on the bottom of your pelvis make a clock. Can you go slow enough that you could even track the numbers? This is amazing against the floor. So I want you to try this later in your hotel room. And the reason why is when we're on the floor, our extensor and flexor muscles don't have to work. So then you can really start to feel the skeleton. Okay? It might not be so smooth at first, but see if you can improve the quality of the motion. Can you go the opposite way? Can you find out where the movement is bumpy or slightly spastic? And can you slow it down even more and find a way around it, like a curvy road? There's so much more movement potential in you and in your kids. Yeah? So some things specifically with high tone, you can also use that idea of two things coming together, north and south coming together. Yeah? Same thing with low tone. You want them to come together for a different reason. You want them to connect through the skeleton, right? We know all about fascia, we know that word, but we come at this from this idea that you can change it through movement and thinking about your skeleton potential. So this is whenever you try new things like this is called using variations. So as many variations as you can come up with is free for you to use, okay? The more creative that you can be with your kids, the better off they're going to be. The idea of pausing and observing them, I'm going to try to move them this way and see what happens. You'll be surprised to learn, they've never done that before. You can create it with your hands. You can create it by a constraint. So a constraint is like using a different orientation to gravity, putting them on their back, putting them on their stomach, doing it in sitting, in any different surfaces. Firm surfaces give them more feedback. It's not always great for super toned kids. Sometimes you have to give them a little softer surface. But supporting them, coming up with variations of your own it's free. It's free for you to explore. The other things you can try with variations is the size of the movement. Very important to go in a small range to start, right? The speed of a movement, you know now from this hand thing that we did, if you came in late, you're going to have to go back and watch the hand interlacing. You know that you sense more when you go slower, and that's what you want to elicit in your kiddos. You want them to be able to sense themselves in movement, because the brain makes a picture of itself through movement. So especially if your kiddo wears AFOs, you want to take those off sometimes and move the foot around, move the ankle around. Even if it doesn't move, you can touch, you can tap lightly. Stroking is less sensorial to the brain in terms of themselves. They feel you more. So it's better to just try that idea of just connecting. And when you connect with yourself, you're going to be able to connect with them. When you connect with them, they're going to be able to feel themselves. When they can feel themselves, they're going to make a map in the brain of themselves. Yeah, is that kind of following my lead of thinking here a little bit? Lastly, observe their changes. This is very important. When you can observe if they're sensing or feeling themselves differently, then you know something different is happening in their brain. So you don't constantly have to be doing something, but if you're very intentional about it and then hands off and let them observe it, that's when they're going to be able to take that and make a picture of it. You all have probably seen this when a child is really starting to get something new. They get a look on their face and suddenly it's like you're not there. Do you know what I'm talking about? Babies do this all the time. That's when they're so in their own sensorial experience that they're making those connections. Oftentimes what happens in sessions is when that moment happens, people get really excited. So you actually want to not get excited because you don't want to pull them out of themselves. So the minute your child starts to do something new, scream internally, excitement. Because as soon as they get pulled out of themselves, they're not thinking, sensing, moving, and feeling within themselves. Yeah? It's very hard. I get very excited and I have to tell myself to keep it in, keep it in. So I just repeat this. You don't have to be an anatomist to improve your kiddo every day. You can play with your quality of touch. You can come up with new ways to sense yourself and make it a practice, because awareness building is a practice. And as much as I'd love everybody to come see me every second of every day, the successful ones are the ones that take this home and come back with questions. I tried this, I felt this. They get a lesson from me so you can feel, when I give a functional integration, what it's like to take this kind of gentle touch into the nervous system. Yeah? So I do suggest that you know about, so Feldenkrais was sort of the overarching founder of this kind of thinking. There are some other people who studied with him that went on that I'm sure you've heard about. Anat Ben-Yael method, the ABM method, she studied with Feldenkrais. Kids Beyond Limits is her book. Excellent, excellent, excellent book. I really highly recommend it. Another method that came out of the Feldenkrais method is called Child Space. Love that book. It's a little more technical. Well, no, I don't know that it's more technical. I love them both for different reasons. The Neuro Horizon Primer is another woman out of California. The JKA method, Jeremy Krauss approach, is another one. So all of these people studied with Feldenkrais and then kind of took a piece of it or an approach to it and built their method off of it. We didn't talk a lot about trauma. I could do another whole series just on trauma. But what they're finding, and this book talks about it, the body keeps score, keeps the score. They're talking a lot about how PTSD is greatly improved through somatic practice because it teaches the brain to be in this moment and to, instead of firing the chemicals from the traumatic event. So that's a really good book. It's very thick. I love these two books by Norman Doidge, The Brain That Changes Itself and The Brain's Way of Healing. These are fantastic books that are really, you can really understand them, but he goes through some of the science and some fantastic stories about neuroplasticity and the history of neuroplasticity. And then Feldenkrais's book, Awareness Through Movement. I will put this slide in particular on my website for you. But I have this free ebook, as I told you. There are some ways that you can work with me online. I have an Awareness Through Movement library. So during the pandemic, we just all taught online, and they're anywhere from 25-minute lessons to longer. On every topic from knees to noses, and so I have that, and then I see people in Phoenix, Arizona. I recently started a foundation as a fiscal sponsor arm of another nonprofit, so I'm trying to start my foundation to receive tax-deductible donations for intensives for kiddos in need. So this is a brand new launch this month, so pretty excited about that. I really want everyone who wants to try this to be able to. That's my goal. So I didn't leave a ton of time, but we do have 5 minutes or so if you have questions, concerns, curiosities. That was a lot of information and probably different than you've heard anywhere else. So yeah, open the floor. Yeah.
What are when someone's getting started in this, a child,
Yeah.
what are your recommendations for frequency, or is it intense and then back off? Is it like
It's a great question, and I think it depends on the individual and the whole family circuit. So I always say that I think it's easier for some people to actually do an intensive in a state that they don't live in, because when you're in your hometown, it's hard to do your real life sometimes, and try to get back and forth to appointments. But it's really about frequency. So when you are learning how to do something new, right? Just go back to this interlacing of the hands. That's a very simple thing, but when we're talking about learning how to crawl, that's much more complicated. So we want to introduce wherever the child is, and we want to introduce one next step, and then we need to repeat it. We need to use variations and constraints and repeat it in various ways so that the brain can use it. So first it's introducing the new pattern, then it's repeating it, so that hopefully it becomes a pattern. But all we can do is create the condition. So I think that's a hard question to answer, but I think that intensives are great because then they get 10 lessons, they get 10 experiences hands-on, then they can go home and play with it. Kids learn through play. So it has to be playful and fun, right? But I do have people who come weekly or get like 3-week or 4-week, but yeah, you can do it either way. I know ABM is a little more like we do this way and this way and this way. I'm not quite as structured in that sense because I think it has to work with the whole family unit. You know, I've known other people who like the kid has a hard time in a car, right? So we have to take that into consideration, especially if it's a brain injury and it's a potential for epilepsy, seizures. We have to take that into consideration and figure out what works for each family. Yeah? So I don't know if that kind of helps, but yeah, good. Yeah. Yeah.
So the different movements that we're supposed to try with our children, is it generally best to see that through an intensive first, to know where to start and which movements to do on them?
I'm so glad you asked that. Here's what I'm going to say. It is not what you do, it is how you do it. You can start right now. If you are home in yourself and you start to make a practice of being home in yourself and knowing how to calm yourself down and knowing how to connect with yourself and trying this on the floor because it's easier to get there, you can start playing with your child today. You are not going to hurt your child. And you don't have to know exactly everything about a skeleton. You know your child better than I'm going to know your child. But I'm going to look at your child as a skeleton and say, what doesn't he know about? And then that's where we're going to play. Yeah? So if he doesn't like it, then you take your hands off and you try something different. because that's what we do. Yeah.
When we're looking at movements, you said sometimes smaller is better. So instead
Yes.
of doing a full leg movement, we might be working just at the foot.
Yeah, right, exactly. So sometimes like I'll want to go really small, but then a kid doesn't want to go really small, right? So then I'm like, okay, we're going to go big first and then go backwards. So then maybe I'll take my hands with him, or I'll go to different places in his body and go, do you feel, when you make this big movement, do you feel how it stops right here? Could all of it go? Yeah, but my intention in my hands is always soft, slow. Even if they're going crazy, I'm like right here, wherever the blind spot is in what I don't see moving. Does that help a little bit? Yeah, great. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
What about children with, like young children with cerebral palsy? How do you start working with them?
Same, exact same. So if they're not comfortable laying down, I will work with them on my lap. And when they go into high tone or they go into some of those reflex patterns, I go with them first. Remember that slide? I don't remember, it was 5 or something. Go with them first. Help them support what they're doing, feel what they're doing, so then you can get out of that. Because you know what it's like, right? When they do that and you can't move them, right? Or is it that? I don't know. When they do that, right, it's uncomfortable. So I will often come under their ribs and help them feel how to move in a different way out of it. Just start playing with the rib cage. The ribs can move so many ways. I am not a dancer. But you can really move your ribs in lots and lots of different ways. So that's how I would say, even if they're really spastic, help them feel themselves. Because when they can feel what they're doing, then they can make a different choice. But until then, no amount of therapy is going to help. They have to feel what they're doing, what their brain is doing.
Hands on themselves?
Oh, you could do that. You could do that. I do. Anything is possible. You have to be creative, yeah? It's total creativity here. Total creativity. There is no wrong way. I think sometimes we're scared to touch, right? It's like you know how to change diapers and get them there. But I think there's so many transition points in between all of that time where you have the opportunity to help them feel that change. Yeah? Does that help? That's a great idea, though. I would totally do that. The only thing we don't do is we don't force anything, right? We don't force anything. We don't create any more trauma. We go with what they want to do first, always, okay? So get this ebook and do read it and use it. Yeah.
All of these techniques work better when it's for spasticity as opposed to like floppiness, like if there's like not neck and shoulder.
No, because floppiness is a lack of coordination and activity. So I can create that with a kiddo that's really floppy too. Yeah, I have one just recently that, they said he'll never hold his head up, and that kid's holding his head up now. So, it's just, you don't know what's going to happen, but you just create that possibility because you want the muscles, sometimes you want the muscles to work a little bit better together, not necessarily like let go, right? So you can create that condition and just by playing with how does the force move through the skeleton? Yeah, great question. Yeah. Anybody else? Well, I'm quite open to talking the next day or so. I will be here tomorrow as well, and I'm down at the end of the hall there, so feel free to drop on by, and I do have all that information back there, and get a copy of this free ebook, and I thank you all for having me here and for coming. Thank you.